The cops showed up at my cabin that morning. 3 of them, walking slow, like they already knew my name. But here's the thing. I don't even live in that neighborhood. I don't pay their fees. I don't follow their stupid rules. And yet somehow, the HOA decided I was their property. Their president stood by the patrol car, in her bright yellow suit, smiling, like this was her victory. And when she said the words, "You under arrest," I realized this wasn't about rules anymore. It was personal. Hey everyone, welcome back to Echo Justice Stories, where every perfect neighborhood hides a secret. If you really hate HOAs, or you've ever dreamed of standing up to them, then hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me what you'd do in my place. And don't forget to share this story with that one friend, the one who's still fighting their HOA nightmare. The cops stood in my driveway, 3 of them, hands on their belts, eyes locked on me. I was still in my morning shirt, barefoot, holding a coffee mug that said "retired but dangerous." Steam rose from it like it was nervous too. The lake behind them was calm, too calm for what was about to happen. One of the officers said, "Sir, we got a call from the Homeowners Association." I almost laughed right there. I said, "You mean the people who complain about mailbox colors?" He didn't laugh, he just stared, like he was reading a script he didn't believe in. The woman in yellow stepped out from behind the cruiser. You couldn't miss her perfect hair, perfect heels, perfect evil energy. That's when I remembered her name, Linda, the HOA president from hell. She smiled like she was posing for a church newsletter morning. She said, voice sharp enough to slice glass, "You've been warned before about the dock violations." Dock violations? My dock wasn't even on their map. I told her that and she said, "We've expanded jurisdiction. The board approved it." I said, "Lady, your board can't even approve good taste in siding colors." But before I could finish, the officer said, "Sir, please calm down." Calm down. They were standing on my land, calling me a trespasser in my own cabin. The air felt heavy. You could smell the mix of lake water, pine, and tension. Linda stepped closer. "You can make this easy, or make it hard." I sipped my coffee and said, "Oh, honey, I always choose hard." She didn't like that. Her smile dropped for the first time, the kind of silence that follows. That's when you realize you just challenged a suburban god. The HOA wasn't just an organization, it was a cult with clipboards. They fined people for grass being too enthusiastic. They once banned a guy for hanging Christmas lights past community taste levels. And now they were trying to control me even though my property was a good 2 miles outside their border. This whole thing started weeks ago. It was a letter, pink envelope, cursive handwriting, looked innocent, until I opened it. Inside was a list of violations: unapproved dock extension, unregistered watercraft, and unauthorized outdoor lighting. They even attached pictures, taken from across the lake. Creepy, right? I ignored the first few, thought maybe it was a mistake, but when I got fined $2,000 for non-compliance with community standards, that's when I realized this wasn't a mistake, this was war. So when the cops showed up that morning, I was ready, not legally ready, just emotionally caffeinated. They asked for my ID. I asked for a warrant. They didn't have one. I pointed to my mailbox. "See that? That's a county box, not an HOA box." One of the younger officers looked confused. The older one sighed like he'd seen this HOA nonsense before. Linda crossed her arms. "Sir, you're not taking this seriously." "Oh, I am," I said, "just not you." You could almost hear her brain snap. She whispered something to the officer, probably something like, "Is hostile. Lady." I was drinking coffee in sarcasm. She started walking toward my dock. I followed. The officers followed me. It felt like a parade of stupidity marching toward the water. She pointed to my fishing boat. "That," she said, "is an unregistered water vehicle." I said, "That's a canoe, Linda. It doesn't even have an engine." "Well," she said, "it still must be inspected by the HOA's Water Safety Committee." There it was again, that fake politeness wrapped around pure insanity. I said, "You mean the same committee that fined a guy for swimming with a bay?" Her jaw tightened. She wasn't used to people talking back. Then she said something that really set me off. "You can either cooperate now, or face arrest for trespassing." I laughed. "The cops, didn't they?" Stepped a little closer. I said, "Do you understand how property lines work?" "Because I do." She pulled out a file, papers, maps, signatures, all printed in that HOA font that screams, "I have too much time and not enough friends." "This area," she said, pointing to the map, "falls under Lakeside HOA expansion effective last quarter." I took the paper and flipped it over. No county stamp, no zoning approval, just her signature and a few others. Cute, I said. Did you all sign it over brunch? Her face turned red, and that's when she said it. Officers, he's resisting compliance. Resisting compliance. That's not even a real crime, but they moved in anyway. One grabbed my arm. The coffee spilled across the dock. Steam rose from the wood, and all I could think was, this can't be real. They told me to turn around. I didn't. I said, you're about to arrest a man on his own land for not liking the HOA president's haircut. The young officer looked uncomfortable. Sir, please don't make this harder. I said, buddy, it's already HOA hard. Then Linda pulled out her phone, recording me smiling again like this was her victory moment. That fake kind of smile that says, I control everything, hey. But she didn't know. She just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because I had my own recordings too, every call, every letter, every threat. And the county clerk on speed dial. The cops ended up not cuffing me that day, maybe because they realized how ridiculous it looked. 3 officers arresting a man in sandals holding a coffee cup over a dock fine. They told me, this is civil, not criminal. Settle it in court. Linda looked furious, her plan falling apart in real time. As they walked away, she said quietly, you'll regret this. I said, maybe, but at least I'll regret it on my own property. She drove off fast. The lake went quiet again, but I knew it wasn't over. Because people like her don't stop, they just regroup. And sure enough, the next morning a new letter showed up, stamped urgent HOA legal notice in bold red. Inside, it said one line, court date scheduled. I stood there on the porch, letter in hand, watching the reflection of the lake, thinking how this peaceful place had turned into a battlefield. I thought about every little thing that led here, the fake smiles, the community rules, the neighbors peeking through blinds pretending not to notice. This was no longer about a dock or a boat or lights, this was about control. And I don't do well with control. So I poured another cup of coffee, sat on the steps, and made a decision. If they wanted a war, they just got one. Next part, you'll see exactly how I turned their own rules against them and made that courtroom echo with justice. But before I tell you that, let me ask you something. If the HOA sent cops to your property like this, what would you do? Would you fight back, or just pack up and leave? Tell me in the comments, because this fight, it's just getting started. The next morning, I woke up to silence. No birds, no wind, just that heavy kind of quiet that makes you feel watched. My coffee tasted bitter, not because of the beans, but because I knew somewhere out there someone in a yellow suit was plotting their next move. I looked out at the lake. Fog sat on the water like it was hiding something. It used to be my peace, now it was my crime scene. The HOA was like a ghost that refused to die. You couldn't see them, but you could feel them. They were in the mail, in the fine print, in the whispers between neighbors. Everyone pretended to love community unity, but behind those trimmed hedges, people were snitching on each other for garbage bins left out 10 minutes too long. I wasn't part of their little world, but that didn't stop them from trying to own me. It started small, a few letters, then the notice of violation signs appeared. Yeah, they actually nailed them to my fence like I was some kind of outlaw. Each one had new charges: unapproved construction, unauthorized lights, unpermitted deck usage. Deck usage, who even writes that? I laughed the first time, then I realized they weren't joking. Every weekend I'd see cars slow down near my property, people pointing, taking pictures, pretending to check their GPS. Linda had her soldiers everywhere, retired folks with binoculars and too much free time, the self-appointed neighborhood watchdogs. They'd write notes like, your grass length exceeds community comfort level, or your shed color disrupts aesthetic continuity. Community comfort level, aesthetic continuity. What the hell did that even mean? I tried to ignore it, I really did, but the HOA doesn't stop when you ignore them. They get louder, they get bolder. Then one afternoon, I saw it, a drone, hovering above my cabin, black, buzzing, steady, watching. I grabbed a rock and nailed it with a perfect throw. It fell into the lake with a satisfying splash. A few hours later, I got an email from the HOA legal department, subject line, destruction of association property. That's when I realized they were escalating. Linda's next move was pure genius. In a twisted way, she hosted a community meeting about lakefront property compliance. The flyer had a picture of my cabin on it. Neighbors I'd never met showed up, people from 3 streets over. They sat in fold-out chairs like it was a town hall, and she stood there, microphone in hand, preaching about fairness and order. I stood outside, listening from the trees. It felt like watching a courtroom where I'd already been convicted. Some people, she said. Think they can live above the rules. But the HOA was created to protect us all. They nodded, clapped like sheep at a sermon. Then she said my name, and that was it. I walked right in. The crowd went silent. You could hear the crickets outside. I said, "Since when do you hold trials without the person you're accusing?" Linda froze. The mic crackled. "I'm just sharing community updates," she said. I said, "Then maybe share this one. Your HOA doesn't legally include my property." She smiled again, fake polished like a car salesman trying to sell you your own vehicle. "We'll let the county decide that," she said, and ended the meeting right there. People left whispering. Some looked at me with pity, others with faith. It was like I was already mocked. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window watching headlights glide across the trees. Every sound felt like a threat. Every shadow felt like a warning. It's funny how peace can turn into paranoia when power gets involved. By morning, I knew I had to fight back, but I didn't know how. Not yet. So I started digging. I drove down to the county records office. The place smelled like paper and old coffee, rows of metal cabinets filled with documents nobody had touched in years. I spent hours there cross-checking maps, boundaries, ownership lines, and finally, I found it. A zoning map from 1998. It showed the original borders of Lakeside HOA. Their reach ended half a mile before my cabin, half a mile. I took a photo, then another, then I printed copies like it was my new Bible. I walked out of that office grinning. People probably thought I was crazy. Maybe I was, but I finally had proof. I emailed the HOA that afternoon, attached the file, subject, "Your jurisdiction ends here." I waited and waited. No reply. The next day, I got another letter instead, this one delivered by hand. It said, "Failure to comply will result in legal enforcement." Legal enforcement. They were bluffing, but it didn't matter. They were doubling down. A few days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a man named Richard. Said he used to be part of the HOA board and quit after things got weird. He told me Linda wasn't just enforcing rules, she was trying to expand the HOA territory to increase her management budget. More land meant more fees, more control, more power. I said, "So she's basically running a suburban empire?" He laughed nervously, "Pretty much." Then he said something that chilled me. "Be careful. People who cross her end up moving." That night, I sat outside watching the lake again. The reflection of the moon rippled on the water somewhere out there. A loon cried, and it sounded like laughter. I thought about packing up, selling the cabin, starting fresh somewhere else. But then I remembered how she smirked that day by the police car like she'd already won. And something inside me snapped. I wasn't leaving, not now, not ever. So I started planning. If she wanted to play legal games, I'd play harder. I gathered every letter, every email, every fine notice, built a folder thicker than a Bible, each document labeled, each violation dated, each one proof of harassment. And at the very bottom of that stack, I put the zoning map, the one that would end her little kingdom. Days turned into weeks, then I got another knock at the door. Not the cops this time, a courier. He handed me an envelope stamped Lakeside HOA Legal Affairs. Inside was a court summons. They were actually taking me to court. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee again. They wanted to fight. Now they had won. I looked out at the lake, at the calm water, at the cabin that had become my battlefield. For the first time in months, I wasn't scared, I was ready. Because the thing about power is that it crumbles the moment someone stops being afraid of it. And I had nothing left to fear. The petty war began on a Tuesday. Because of course it did. Nothing evil ever starts on a weekend, it's always a Tuesday. I woke up to the sound of a truck reversing outside my cabin. Beep, beep, beep. It wasn't delivery, it wasn't repair work, it was them. A bright white HOA maintenance truck parked right in front of my dock, the logo, Lakeside Property Management, staring at me like a bad omen. Two guys jumped out, khaki shorts, reflective vests, clipboards in hand, you know the type. One looked around and said, "Yeah, this the one." The other one nodded and pulled out a camera. I stepped outside, still half asleep. "What's this?" I asked. "Routine inspection." One said as if that explained trespassing. I said, "Routine inspection of property you don't own." He didn't answer, just snapped photos of my fence, my lights, my grill, even my dog's water bowl. Linda probably sent them. I could almost hear her voice in my head saying, "Make sure it's documented." I called out again, "You guys got a warrant?" He said, "We don't need one, sir. HOA guidelines allow property photography for compliance purposes." Compliance purposes, that phrase hit me like nails on a chalkboard. I said, "Buddy, Your HOA guidelines mean about as much here as monopoly money." He frowned, then said, "We'll be noting your behavior in the report." My behavior, apparently, standing on your own porch and defending your land, was bad behavior now. I took a photo of them right back. They didn't like that, and when I told them to leave, one of them muttered, "This is why we need stricter rules." Stricter rules, yeah. That's how dictatorships start. By noon, I got another email subject line, "Immediate notice, interference with HOA staff." It said I was being fined for verbal aggression during inspection. $500. $500 for having a backbone. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't about my dock, this was about control. Linda wanted me to snap. She wanted me angry because angry people make mistakes, and she needed something she could use in court. Well, she was about to regret picking me. I started fighting back, not with fists. With paperwork. I sent emails so long they probably gave her paper cuts just reading them. Every paragraph started with "according to County Statute Section 14 to 22. Every sentence ended with "respectfully, you're out of your mind." I started CCing county officials, land registry clerks, and even the sheriff's office. I wanted them to know if this HOA war turned ugly, I wasn't going down quietly. Then I started my own inspections. I drive through their neighborhood slowly, taking pictures of their fences, their boats, their unapproved colors. Oh, the irony. I found 8 violations in one day: mailboxes, 2 tall trash cans visible from the street, a decorative flamingo statue, technically non-compliant under Community Theme Policy Section C. I sent it all to the board with a note that said, "Just helping maintain the community standards." Petty. Absolutely, but it felt amazing. A week later, I got a letter from Linda herself. It wasn't the usual printed notice. This one was handwritten in perfect cursive with a little flower doodle on the corner that made it creepier somehow. It said, "Mr. Adams, I suggest you stop before things get complicated. Your behavior is unbecoming of a community member." I laughed out loud. Unbecoming? I wasn't even a community member. So I framed that letter, hung it right above my desk, a trophy of her desperation. That night, my porch light went out. Nothing weird. Bulbs burn out all the time, but when I checked the socket, the bulb wasn't burned, it was unscrewed. Just enough to go dark. Someone had been there. I looked around. The woods were quiet, but I swear, I saw a flashlight flicker once near the trees. The next morning, my trash cans were knocked over, every bag ripped open like someone had searched through them. I checked my cameras. Nothing, footage erased, just static. That's when I bought better cameras, real ones, hidden ones. Because this wasn't just petty anymore, this was personal. Days later, I caught it, a late-night figure walking up my driveway wearing a hoodie, holding a clipboard. The camera zoomed in just enough to catch the face, one of Linda's board members, a guy named Frank, retired accountant, neighborhood snitch. He was snapping photos of my porch at 2 a.m. I didn't call the cops, I waited. The next morning, I printed the photos and sent them straight to the HOA board. Subject line, "Your member trespassed last night." No response, of course not. But later that day, I got a message from an unknown number, just said, "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I replied, "You picked the wrong cabin." Then came the community email blast. Linda wrote a public statement claiming there were ongoing safety concerns at the lake cabin area. She said an unstable resident had been harassing HOA members. She didn't name me, she didn't have to. Everyone knew. The next morning, people drove by slow, some even stopped at the end of the driveway pretending to take lake photos while recording me. I waved big smile mug in hand, let them see I wasn't scared. But inside, I was boiling. I realized what she was doing. She wanted to isolate me, make me look like the problem, gaslight the entire neighborhood into thinking I was the villain. So I flipped the script. I made a website, called it The Truth About Lakeside HOA. Posted every document, every fine, every boundary map, even screenshots of Linda's fake signatures. It blew up overnight. Neighbors started messaging me anonymously, saying they'd been bullied too, over fence colors, patio furniture, even the wrong type of bait feeder. They thanked me for speaking up. For the first time, I wasn't fighting alone. That's when the real fun began. The HOA started sending cease and desist letters threatening legal consequences for defamation. But I didn't stop, because everything I posted was real, public record. They couldn't silence facts, and Linda knew it. A week later, I went to grab my mail and saw a notice pinned to my mailbox. Violation, defamatory online conduct. I laughed so hard I almost dropped it. They were literally fining me for freedom of speech. I took a photo and posted it online with the caption, HOA now policing the internet too. It went viral, thousands of comments, people across the country sharing their own HOA horror stories. Linda had unleashed something she couldn't control, a wave of angry homeowners who'd had enough. The more she pushed, the more she exposed herself. And when the local news station caught wind of it, oh boy, that's when the story exploded. A reporter came by the lake, did an interview with me, asked how it all started. I just smiled and said, it started with a doc and a woman who thought she owned the world. The next day, the HOA website went offline. Linda vanished for a week. Rumor was some board members quit, others were layering up. But I knew her, she wasn't done yet. And I wasn't safe. Because when people like her lose control, they don't back down, they burn the rule book. It happened early in the morning, around 7:30. The kind of hour when the world is quiet but trouble is already awake. I was pouring coffee, same mug, same piece, then I heard it. Sirens. Soft at first, then louder, closer. My stomach dropped because I already knew who was behind it. Linda. I stepped outside, the sound echoed across the lake, birds flew off the trees like even they didn't want to witness this mess. 3 police cars, lights flashing, red and blue reflections bouncing off the water like some kind of bad dream. A few neighbors were already out, phones up, recording, pretending to walk their dogs, but really just waiting for drama. And right there, standing tall beside the first cruiser, was Linda. Same yellow suit, same polished smile, same look of satisfaction, like this was her Super Bowl. The lead officer walked toward me. Mr. Adams. I nodded. Holding my coffee, he said, we received multiple reports from the Lakeside HOA about an aggressive and non-compliant property owner. I almost laughed. Non-compliant? You mean independent? He didn't smile. They never do. Linda stepped forward like she was a star witness. She had a folder in her hand stuffed with papers and screenshots. Officer, she said sweetly, this man has ignored repeated warnings, destroyed community property, and harassed board members. Her voice sounded like honey over poison. I said, you forgot to add breathes without permission. The officer looked between us and said, sir, we're just here to de-escalate. Please cooperate. De-escalate. They were literally escalating it by showing up with lights blazing like I was running a drug cartel out of a fishing cabin. I said, this is my property. My land. You got any warrants? He said, no, sir. But they filed a formal complaint. Linda cut in again. The cabin is on association soil. I turned to her. Association soil? What does that even mean? You think you own Date now? Her smile didn't flinch, but her eyes did, cold and sharp. I could see she was enjoying every second of this. She wanted me angry. She wanted me to lose it on camera. So I didn't. I just stood there calm, steady, sipping my coffee. Then she crossed the line. She pointed at my dock. That structure violates lakefront ordinances. His refusing removal. That's illegal occupancy. Illegal occupancy for my own dock built 20 years ago by my dad. I said, if my dock is illegal, then your logic is too. The officers didn't know what to do. You could see it in their faces, that awkward look of please don't make me be part of this HOA circus. But Linda was relentless. She pulled out a document and said, under Section 12B of the Lakeside Expansion Act, the HOA now governs all lake access properties within 800 feet of the main subdivision. I took the paper, looked at it, and started laughing. Linda, this isn't a legal document. This is a PowerPoint printout with your signature on it. Her face changed. The mask cracked for the first time. I could see the frustration boiling underneath. That's the thing about people who crave control. They can't handle defiance. She hissed, you're done, Mr. Adams. You'll regret crossing me. I said, funny. I was just about to say the same to you. And then, she said it. Officers, detain him. He's trespassing on HOA-controlled property. The lead cop blinked. We can't do that without a lawful order. She stepped closer. Her voice sharper. Now I'm the lawful authority, eh? Oh, that did it. The officer looked at her like she'd just declared herself President of the United States. He said slowly, this is a civil matter, not criminal. But she wouldn't back off. Her cheeks flushed, her eyes wild. You could tell she wasn't used to hearing the word no. That's when one of the neighbors shouted, arrest him already. And suddenly more people were watching, phones up, recording everything, waiting for the HOA drama to turn into a viral clip. I stood there in the middle of it all, sun hitting the lake, sirens fading, and realized something. This wasn't about rules anymore, this was about power and humiliation. Linda didn't want justice, she wanted submission. The officers finally told her to step back, she argued, but after 10 minutes of back-and-forth nonsense, they left. No arrest, no charges, no victory. Just a red-faced HOA president standing on my driveway watching her little plan fall apart. I turned to her and said, "You done?" She stared at me for a few seconds, then smiled that quiet, dangerous kind of smile and said, "Oh, I'm just getting started." An hour later, she was gone, but I knew this was just round one. By afternoon, I got an email from the HOA attorney, a man named Greg. Her new weapon. He wrote, "Mr. Adams, the Lakeside HOA is filing for injunctive relief regarding your continued violations and noncompliance. Please prepare for court proceedings." I stayed at the screen and just started laughing again. Because here's the irony. They were suing me for living on land they didn't even legally own. That night I couldn't sleep. The lake was too still, the air too heavy. Every creak in the wood felt like footsteps. Every car passing by made me wonder if it was her again. I sat by the window, lights off, watching the dark water ripple under the moon. And for a second, I thought, maybe I should have backed off, maybe I should have just sold the place and disappeared. But then I remembered the way she said it, like she already owned me. And that's when it clicked. This wasn't just about me anymore, it was about everyone like me. Everyone who'd been bullied, fined, harassed, and controlled by people who think their HOA badge makes them gods. So no, I wasn't backing off. I was going to court, and I was going to bury her in her own paperwork. The next few days were chaos, emails, legal threats, neighbors whispering. The HOA started spreading rumors that I'd threatened board members, that I was unstable, that the cops had found evidence on my property. It was all lies, but in a perfect neighborhood, lies spread faster than truth. I stopped going into town, stopped talking to people, because everyone either hated me or secretly wanted to be me for standing up to the queen of control. A week later, a letter arrived, thick envelope, official seal. Inside, court summons. They'd actually done it. They were taking me to court for defamation, property violation, and noncompliance with HOA expansion policy. I put the paper down, looked out the window, and smiled. Because little did they know, I'd already prepared something that would blow their entire case apart. I took a deep breath, looked at the lake, and whispered to myself, "Game on." The moment that court letter hit my hands, something in me switched. Fear left and strategy moved in. They wanted a fight. They were about to get one, but not the kind they were ready for. I spent that whole night sitting at my old wooden table, the one with the coffee rings and scratches from 100 late nights. The lake outside was calm. The moonlight danced on the water like it was cheering for me. I opened every folder, every letter, every email they ever sent. Stack after stack of their nonsense threats, fines, fake policies, and that stupid expansion map they printed in Comic Sans. I wasn't just reading anymore, I was building ammo. I called the county clerk first thing in the morning. A tired voice answered. "Records office. How can I help?" I said, "I need every zoning file for the lakeside area, especially anything mentioning HOA expansions." She sighed. "You again?" "Yep," I said, "the guy with the crazy HOA story." She laughed. "You're famous here." Good, that meant people were watching. She sent me a scanned folder that afternoon, and when I opened it, there it was. The golden ticket. A line buried deep in an old county memo. The Lakeside HOA expansion proposal was denied in 2004 due to jurisdiction overlap. Denied 20 years ago. And Linda still built her empire on that lie. I printed it, framed it, and hung it right next to my unbecoming behavior letter from her. My trophy wall was growing. Then I went full detective mode. I found neighbors who used to live under her rule, people who'd been fined for having the wrong curtains, for using garden gnomes, for letting their kids play chalk on the sidewalk. They were still bitter, still angry. I interviewed them one by one, recorded everything. A retired couple told me she once trespassed just to measure the height of their birdhouse. A single mom said Linda threatened to have her car towed because it was a color inconsistent with the neighborhood palette. I had enough evidence to write a Netflix documentary. Then I called Richard, the ex-board member who warned me earlier. He picked up. I said, "You were right. She's worse than I thought." He said, "She always was." I asked, "You still got access to the HOA files?" He hesitated, then said, "Maybe." I said, "Richard, I don't need maybe. I need proof." That night, He showed up at my cabin nervous, sweating, holding a flash drive like it was contraband. "This is everything," he said. "Emails, fines, vote records, even the bribes." Bribes. That word hit me like thunder. I plugged it in and there it was, Linda's dainty empire in digital form. Emails between her and contractors, kickbacks from beautification projects, secret board votes held without members present. She'd been pocketing thousands under maintenance fees, and now I had it all. I barely slept. My mind was racing. Every lie she told, every time she said, "Rules are rules," was about to come back and bite her. When morning came, I put on my best shirt, not fancy, just clean, the kind of shirt that says, "I'm calm, but I'm about to destroy you." I walked into that courthouse like I owned the place. Linda was already there, yellow suit, as always, perfect hair, fake confidence. She smiled like she'd already won, that same smile from the day she called the cops. Her lawyer, Greg, was whispering to her, slick suit, slicker hair, the kind of guy who probably charges $600 an hour to lose gracefully. I just nodded and said, "Morning, sunshine." The judge came in, everyone stood, then it began. Greg started with his speech, smooth, practiced, full of fake concern. He called me a disruptive individual. He said I'd refused compliance and defamed the community leadership. He used words like hostile, reckless, disrespectful, as if standing up for yourself was a crime now. When it was my turn, I didn't use big words, I just told the truth. "Your Honor," I said, "they fined me for grass, for fences, for light bulbs. They even tried to arrest me on property they don't legally control. But the biggest violation here is their own." Then I slid that county memo across the table. The judge picked it up, read it, and raised an eyebrow. "Denied expansion," he said aloud. Linda's face drained of color. Greg stammered, "Your Honor, that's outdated documentation." I said, "Then why's your whole case built on it?" Then I plugged in the flash drive. I had the clock project the emails on the screen. The courtroom went quiet. You could hear the hum of the old air conditioner. Every email, every payment, every approved project with missing invoices, it was all right there. Linda's lawyer tried to object. The judge said, "Overruled. Let's see where this goes." I looked right at her while the evidence played and whispered, "Rules are rules, remember?" Her confidence cracked. The smile faded. The judge leaned back, sighing. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "it appears your organization has overstepped both jurisdiction and authority." Linda tried to talk, but her voice broke. Greg mumbled something about administrative confusion, but the judge wasn't buying it. He slammed his gavel once. "Case dismissed, and I'm referring this to county oversight for investigation." Bang! Just like that, it was over. I walked out slow, like a man walking away from an explosion in a movie. The reporters outside were already waiting. Someone asked, "Sir, how does it feel to beat the HOA?" I said, "It feels like freedom, smells like lake water." That night, I sat on my porch. The air was calm again. The lights from the houses across the lake twinkled soft for the first time in months. I could breathe. No fines, no threats, no yellow suit haunting my mornings. Just peace. But peace is a strange echo after war sometimes. I still check the window, half expecting to see a clipboard silhouette in the dark. Guess old habits die hard. You ever walk into a courtroom and feel the air change? Like everyone's pretending it's justice, but it's really just theater. That's what it felt like the day I went back for the HOA's appeal. Yeah, they appealed because losing once wasn't enough for Linda. She wanted revenge, dressed up as paperwork. The courthouse smelled like coffee and cold ambition. I wore the same shirt I wore the first time for good luck, or maybe just to remind her I hadn't changed. She was already there, yellow suit, tighter smile, new haircut, like she'd spent the last week practicing her innocent look in the mirror. Greg, her lawyer, was there too, looking confident again. He must have thought a second round meant a second chance. I just sat down quietly, hands folded, smiling like I knew something they didn't. And I did. Because the night before the hearing, I got a call from the county investigator. He said, "Mr. Adams, we finished our review of the HOA's records." My heart stopped for a second. Then he said, "You might want to bring a camera to court tomorrow." So there we were, me, her, the whole audience of bored citizens waiting for their traffic tickets, and a judge who looked like he'd seen one too many HOA disputes in his life. The judge started calm, "Mrs. Hayes, Mr. Adams, let's keep this short." Linda stood up first. "Your Honor," she said, "we're simply asking for the original decision to be reconsidered based on new evidence." New evidence. That phrase hit me funny because she had no idea what real evidence looked like. The judge nodded. Proceed. Greg pulled out a folder, started talking about community impact and public order. He showed photos of my dog, my truck, even my mailbox. Non-compliant structures, he said proudly, like he'd solved a murder. The judge looked bored. Then Greg dropped the line he thought would win the case. The defendant continues to defame the HOA and its leadership publicly. He looked straight at me and said, Your Honor, he's been running an online smear campaign. I smiled. Campaign? Nah, just the truth. The judge raised a brow. Do you have proof of defamation? Greg said, Yes, Your Honor. We've brought screenshots. He handed over printed posts from my website, headlines like HOA President lies again and How to Survive Neighborhood Tyranny. The judge skimmed through them, then said, I see no defamation here, just opinion and documented evidence. I almost laughed out loud. Then it was my turn. I stood up and handed the judge a sealed envelope, the one the investigator gave me. He opened it slowly. Inside, a full report from a county auditor. It detailed every illegal fine, every missing dollar, every fake beautification project Linda had signed off. Thousands of dollars gone. And at the bottom, her signature on every single one. The judge leaned back, looked at her, then at me, then said quietly, Mrs. Hayes, you're aware this could lead to a criminal investigation? Her face went pale. Greg whispered something. She shook her head, trembling. I said nothing. I didn't need to. For once, the silence did the talking. The judge looked at me. Mr. Adams, anything else you'd like to add? I said, Yeah, just one thing. I pulled out a photo. It was from that day she called the cops, her standing in her yellow suit pointing at me like a villain in a movie. This, I said, isn't leadership. It's obsession. All I did was try to live in peace. And if that's a crime, then I guess I'll keep breaking the law. The courtroom stayed quiet for a long time. Even the air felt heavy. Then the judge said the words I'll never forget. Case dismissed, permanently. And Mrs. Hayes, you're hereby ordered to reimburse Mr. Adams for all wrongful legal expenses. Boom. That sound, that gavel, it felt like thunder rolling across the lake. Greg started packing up in silence. Linda just stood there staring at the floor. I walked past her, slowly leaned close and said, You should have just let me fish. No anger, no gloating, just truth. Because sometimes the best revenge is not raising your voice, it's letting their empire collapse under its own weight. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting again, same ones from before. One asked, Mr. Adams, how did it feel watching the HOA president get exposed? I said, it felt like watching karma clock in for a double shift. They laughed, but I wasn't joking. When I got back home, the lake looked different, like it finally exhaled. The water was still, the air was soft for the first time in months. Peace didn't feel like a stranger. I sat on the dock, toes in the water, sun setting slow behind the trees. The kind of quiet that used to scare me now felt like victory. Later that night, I got an email from an unknown address. It said, Nice win. She had it coming. No name, no signature, just those words. Maybe it was Richard, maybe it was someone from the board who'd finally had enough. Either way, it meant one thing: her kingdom was falling. A week later, I drove through town past the HOA office. The yellow sign was gone, the windows empty, the whole place shut down. Rumor was, Linda resigned, Greg withdrew his license for a sabbatical, and the HOA was being restructured under county supervision. I didn't smile, didn't celebrate, I just nodded, because justice doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it just ends quietly and perfectly. But here's the funny part. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. No logo, no threats, just one line handwritten in blue ink. Enjoy your freedom while it lasts. No signature, but I knew that handwriting. Linda wasn't gone, not completely. And something told me she wasn't finished. It's strange how silence can feel louder than war. After everything that happened, the hearings, the headlines, the humiliation, the lake finally went quiet again. No cops, no papers, no yellow suits in my driveway. Just wind in the trees and the sound of water lapping against the dock. But peace doesn't come free, it comes with ghosts. I still wake up early sometimes, half expecting to hear that HOA truck again, the reverse beeping echoing through the fog. Old habits die slow, especially when you've spent months defending your own name. The coffee tastes different now, less bitter, but heavier somehow. Maybe that's what victory tastes like, a little burnt around the edges. A week after the last court hearing, I got another letter. No threats, no logos, just one line. Enjoy your freedom while you can. No name, no return address, but I didn't need one. I knew that handwriting, sharp, elegant, and full of hate. Linda's kind of hate doesn't die, it just waits, lurking behind manicured lawns and HOA bylaws. I showed it to the sheriff. He read it, nodded, and said, "Can't prove anything, but if she shows up again, call us." Then he added, almost whispering, "You did the right thing, you know. Most folks don't fight back." I smiled. Maybe that's the problem. After that, I tried to get back to normal fishing, reading, pretending not to look over my shoulder. But normal doesn't come easy when you've been a target. I'd walk into town and people would whisper, some would nod politely, others just stared. I could tell who used to be on her side. They avoided eye contact like guilt had weight. But there were others, people who'd been fined, bullied, silenced. They'd stop me, shake my hand, say things like, "Wish I had your guts, man." And I'd tell them the truth. It's not guts, it's just being tired of being pushed. One evening, I went down to the dock. Sunset was painting the water gold, and for the first time in months, it felt peaceful again. That's when I heard a car door slam behind me. I turned, heart racing. But it wasn't her. It was Richard. He looked older, worn out, but lighter somehow. He said, "Linda's gone." "Gone where?" I asked. He shrugged. "Left town. Sold her house. The HOA's under audit. New boards taking over." I just nodded, didn't smile, didn't cheer. Because sometimes victory doesn't feel like celebration, it feels like silence after thunder. Richard sat beside me. We watched the water for a long time. He said, "You know, she used to say she was protecting the neighborhood." I said, "She wasn't protecting it. She was building a kingdom." He chuckled softly. "Guess every kingdom falls eventually." We didn't say much after that. The lake did all the talking. A few nights later, I found myself scrolling through old photos. The day my dad built that dock, the old fishing trips, the cabin when it was just wood and dreams. Somewhere between all those memories, the chaos didn't seem so big anymore. It was just noise that passed through like a storm that forgot to stay. But then, one night around midnight, I saw headlights outside. They stopped near the end of my driveway, stayed there for a few seconds. No one got out, no doors opened. Just silence, and two beams cutting through the fog. Then they turned off and the darkness swallowed everything again. I stood at the window for a long time after that, watching, waiting, listening. Nothing. Maybe it was nothing, or maybe some ghosts don't let go that easily. The next morning, I went outside. There was a single piece of paper pinned to my mailbox. No words, just a yellow flower drawn in ink. Linda's flower. I laughed, not scared, not angry, just tired. Because I realized something then. People like her never really lose, they just move their fight somewhere else. So now, I keep the letter and the drawing inside a drawer, a reminder that peace isn't the absence of war, it's a decision to stop fighting the wrong people. Sometimes, I walk past my reflection in the window and barely recognize the guy staring back. He looks calmer, but sharper, like someone who's seen the inside of pettiness and came out alive. The lake still holds all the echoes, the sirens, the shouting, the laughter after the verdict. But when the wind is right and the water's still, I swear I can almost hear her voice again. Rules are rules. And I just smile because now, they are my rules. So yeah, maybe I didn't just win against an HOA, maybe I won against the idea that someone else gets to tell you how to live. Because at the end of the day, the real victory isn't beating them in court, it's waking up every morning, free. Now tell me this. If you finally beat the people who tried to control your life, and they disappeared without a trace, but left one last sign that they are still watching, would you ignore it? Or would you be ready for round two? Let me know in the comments, because where I live, peace doesn't last forever.